It had all started so innocently, or at least I had tried to believe it did. Emma and I were inseparable. Best friends since childhood, we shared everything. The same birthday month, the same interests, and the same circle of friends. We used to laugh about how we could never fall for the same guy. That was just one of those things that made us us. We always joked, one of us can't steal the other's guy. But I guess the joke's on me now. It happened so subtly at first that I didn't even realize it. She started seeing Mark, the guy I'd secretly had a crush on for months. And I, ever the loyal friend, didn't say a word. I stepped aside, told myself that I'd been the one to put him out of my mind, that I would be the bigger person, that I could never stand in the way of her happiness. But deep down, the hurt kept growing. I would smile through it all, pretending it didn't bother me, acting like the best friend she'd always known. I convinced myself it was fine. After all, we had so many years together, right? But Emma was never content with just being my best friend anymore. As the months passed, I began to notice how things started changing between us. It wasn't just Mark. It was everything. The attention she once gave me started shifting to him. She would laugh at his jokes, share things with him that used to be ours to share. I watched it all happen, helplessly, as she grew more enamored with him. Slowly, the space between us widened. There were fewer calls, fewer late-night chats, fewer hangouts. In a way, I was losing both of them. It was like they were a package deal now, and I was being left behind. The worst part? She didn't even notice. Emma seemed completely oblivious to the shift. When I tried to bring it up, casually of course, she just brushed it off. "You're overthinking things, Liv," she would say. But I wasn't overthinking it. I was watching the friendship I'd nurtured for years slowly slip through my fingers, and I couldn't even tell her how much it hurt. Then, one day, it was as if the final straw had landed. We were sitting at our usual cafe, sipping coffee, when she dropped the bomb on me. "Oh, by the way, Mark and I are engaged," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. My stomach twisted. The words stung. "Engaged?" I repeated like a fool. "Yeah," she said with a grin, completely unaware of the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. "We're planning to get married next year, and I was thinking—" She trailed off, waiting for me to respond. I could feel my hands tighten around my mug, but I forced myself to smile. "That's amazing, Em. Congrats." But inside, I was dying. She had everything. The guy, the ring, the life I had quietly imagined for myself. And I was just a distant observer, looking in from the outside. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of everything falling apart. And when it came time for the wedding, I would do something that would change everything between us forever. The feeling of betrayal wasn't immediate. At first, it was like a dull ache, something I could push away with distractions. Work was busy, life was moving fast. But the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it became. The worst part? I didn't know when the friendship I'd always valued had started slipping through the cracks. Emma and I had always been in sync, together through thick and thin. But now, it felt like she was pulling away, and I was left fighting for the scraps of the life we once shared. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Emma hadn't just taken Mark from me. She had taken everything. She had become the center of her own little universe, and I was no longer part of the equation. What stung most was how effortless it seemed for her. I was fighting to keep our friendship alive, while she floated through life with Mark by her side, barely acknowledging the space she'd left between us. It wasn't just the engagement either. It was the way she spoke about her new life with him. How she'd casually slip into conversations about their weekends away, the plans they were making, the wedding venue they had already picked out. And each time she did, I felt like she was rubbing salt in an open wound I hadn't even realized was there until it was too late. I remember one evening, she called me to tell me about the dress she'd picked out for the wedding. She was practically squealing with excitement, and all I could do was sit there and nod, pretending that I wasn't dying inside. "You'll be my maid of honor, right?" she asked, as if the invitation had already been extended. I almost choked on my coffee. "Of course," I replied, my voice flat, barely able to disguise the bitterness creeping in. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be a part of it anymore, but I had no choice. I was stuck in this role I hadn't signed up for, just like I'd been stuck in the background of her life for months. But that was the moment something shifted in me. I realized I didn't want to just sit there quietly, pretending everything was fine. I'd been silent for far too long. The truth was, Emma hadn't just stolen Mark from me. She'd stolen the attention, the love, the life I had always thought would be mine. And in that moment, as I listened to her talk about her wedding day, I made a decision. I was going to be the maid of honor. Not because I wanted to celebrate her wedding, but because I needed to take back something, anything that had been taken from me. And if I was going to play that role, I was going to make sure I did it in a way that would make her regret everything. I wasn't just going to be the best maid of honor. I was going to become the villain in her story, and she had no idea what I was about to do. It wasn't an easy decision to make. To plot my revenge, to put myself in a position where I would be standing beside her on the most important day of her life. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Emma had always been the star, and I had always been the supporting character. She had the charm, the beauty, the effortless way of getting what she wanted, while I had always been the sidekick. The one who helped, the one who cheered from the sidelines, the one who sacrificed. But now, standing on the edge of her perfect wedding, I saw an opportunity. I had spent years playing the role of the good friend, the supportive sister, the one who never complained. Now, I was going to take back what was mine, starting with the maid of honor position. If she thought I was going to sit back and watch her walk down the aisle with Mark, pretending everything was fine, she was wrong. I wasn't going to be a passive observer anymore. I was going to be in control, at the center of everything, just like I should have been from the start. The plan started forming quickly in my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how easy it would be. I had always been the quiet one, the one who never made waves, the one who kept the peace. But peace hadn't gotten me anything. It hadn't earned me the love or attention I deserved. No, if I was going to be the maid of honor, I was going to make sure I was the one who ran the show. First, I started with the little things. I made sure to be the first one to offer suggestions for the wedding details, colors, decorations, even the menu. I watched Emma's face carefully whenever I threw out my ideas. At first, she was hesitant, even annoyed, but as I pushed a little harder, her resistance started to fade. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want to make waves with me, especially not with her wedding so close. So she let me take the reins. And each time I managed to push her back just a little more, I felt a small victory. It wasn't about the wedding, not really. It was about something deeper, something that had been building for years. It was about the fact that Emma had always been the one who was noticed, who was praised, who was loved. While I sat quietly in the background doing the work, making the sacrifices, and now it was my turn. The next step in my plan was the most important. I had to make sure everyone saw me as the perfect maid of honor, the one who was handling everything. Emma had always been the star of every show, and it was time for her to see what it felt like to be upstaged, to be the one in the background. When I texted Emma to tell her I'd already called the wedding planner to confirm my role, I could almost hear her hesitation. She didn't like it. She didn't like the idea of me taking over, but she wasn't going to fight it. Not anymore. I could already see the cracks beginning to show. For the first time in years, I was no longer the invisible one. I was at the center of it all, and I wasn't going to stop until I had what I deserved. Until Emma knew exactly what it felt like to be left out of her own story. The engagement party arrived, and with it, the first test of my new role. I had decided early on that this wouldn't be a simple event. It wouldn't be about the decorations or the toasts or the cake. No, I would make sure it was about me. It was time to show everyone, including Emma, how much I had been holding back, how much I had been willing to sacrifice. I had been the good friend for so long, and now it was my turn to take the spotlight. When I arrived at the venue, I felt a rush of anticipation. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, but my focus was entirely on one thing: taking control. I smiled as I walked in, greeting the guests, making small talk, but my eyes never strayed far from Emma. I watched her move through the crowd, laughing and joking with the people she deemed worthy of her attention. Mark was by her side, of course, always ready with his charming grin and the kind of smile that made everyone else disappear. But not me. I wasn't here to fade into the background. I made my way toward the bar, where a group of their mutual friends were clustered. I joined the conversation effortlessly, injecting myself into their chatter with just the right touch of humor and confidence. My voice was steady, my words carefully chosen to project authority, to make sure everyone knew I was just as important as the bride-to-be. I could see Emma glancing over at me, her gaze flicking from my laughter to the group around me. She didn't like it, I could tell. She didn't like how easy it was for me to take her place in her own world. The longer I stood there, engaging with everyone, the more her discomfort grew. It wasn't obvious at first, but I could see the cracks starting to appear. The small twitch in her smile, the way she would clink her glass nervously, her eyes flicking back and forth between Mark and me. She was losing control, and I was just getting started. I could feel the power shift, subtle but undeniable. I had the attention of the people who mattered most in the room, and Emma was beginning to feel the sting of exclusion. It was delicious. I could hear their compliments, their admiration, and I couldn't help but relish in the feeling of being seen. For once, I wasn't the one standing in the shadows, playing the background role. I was the one everyone was talking to, the one everyone wanted to be near. As the evening wore on, I continued to navigate the crowd, making sure to be seen with the right people at the right times. I wasn't trying to overshadow Emma completely, at least not yet. But I was laying the foundation for what was to come. Emma's grip on the night, and on her own life, was slipping. And the more I observed, the more I realized how far gone things truly were. By the time the party began winding down, Emma had become quieter, more withdrawn. I could see her standing near the corner of the room, holding a drink, trying to look busy while Mark engaged with the group. She wasn't used to not being the center of attention. She didn't know how to handle it when someone else took the reins. I made my move. As I passed by her, I caught her eye, offering her a smile that was just a little too knowing. "Having fun?" I asked casually, my voice dripping with sweetness. She tensed for a moment, as if not sure how to respond, but I could see the crack in her armor, the flicker of uncertainty. "Yeah," she said with forced enthusiasm, her eyes flicking away. "It's just a lot, you know?" I smiled again, stepping back and letting the moment hang there, knowing full well that the damage was done. Emma wasn't the star anymore, and if she didn't see it yet, she would soon enough. The night was over, and as I made my way out, I realized something. I wasn't just taking the maid of honor role from her. I was taking control of her life, piece by piece, and she didn't even know it. The days after the engagement party felt like a slow burn, like the smoldering remains of a fire that hadn't fully consumed everything in its path. I could tell Emma was on edge, though she tried to hide it behind a mask of polite smiles and perfect Instagram posts. She'd text me a couple of times, asking about the wedding details, but I could feel the distance growing between us. She wasn't used to not being the center of attention, and the fact that I had managed to dominate the party in ways she couldn't control was starting to weigh on her. I knew she was watching, waiting for me to slip up. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. Every move I made now felt deliberate, calculated. Every conversation I had with people she was close to had a purpose. I wasn't just playing the role of maid of honor anymore. I was becoming the woman everyone was starting to notice. The one who commanded attention without even trying. And it felt damn good. That week, I ran into Mark at the coffee shop near our office. I'd seen him a few times before, mostly at gatherings where I had kept to myself. But now, with the shift in power, things felt different. When he saw me, he smiled. A little too wide, a little too eager, and waved me over. We chatted casually, and it felt easy. I made sure to ask questions about him, about how things were going with the wedding plans. Each time I spoke, I was intentional, planting seeds of curiosity. "Do you think Emma is handling all this okay?" I asked, casually leaning on the counter as I sipped my coffee. Mark hesitated for a moment, and for a split second, I could see him take a mental step back, weighing the risks of what he said next. "She's fine," he replied quickly, his smile faltering. "But yeah, it's been a lot for her. You know how she gets when things don't go exactly as planned." I could feel the door opening, just a crack, and I pushed it further. "Yeah, I know. It's hard for her to share the spotlight, isn't it?" He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to the door. "I wouldn't say that," he mumbled, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. "She's been great, really. It's just, well, wedding stress." I nodded, giving him a knowing smile. "I get it. It's a huge day for her. But it's hard to juggle everything, especially when you've been the center of attention for so long." Mark shifted again, his unease palpable. But that was exactly the point. He had already heard the undercurrent in my words, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. He was beginning to see what I had known all along. Emma wasn't handling things well. She was slipping, and I was there to take her place, step by careful step. The next day, I called the wedding planner. I made sure to check in on a few last-minute decisions, suggesting ideas and taking control of the schedule for the bridal party. I could hear the hesitation in the planner's voice as I pushed for more responsibility, but she didn't protest. She was just doing her job, and I was more than happy to do mine, at Emma's expense. As the days passed, I noticed Emma becoming more tense. She started sending me shorter messages, no longer asking for my input or advice on the wedding. I could tell she was feeling the walls close in around her, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. It wasn't just about getting back at her anymore. It was about power. It was about finally standing tall, not behind her, but beside her. No, above her. The more she tried to cling to control, the more I took from her. And every time I saw her falter, every time I heard her voice crack, I knew I was one step closer to my ultimate victory. The question wasn't whether she would notice my presence. It was whether she could ever regain control once I had it all. The tension between Emma and me continued to simmer, but neither of us spoke about it. Instead, it was woven into every glance, every forced smile. The silence between us grew louder with each passing day, more oppressive. It was like a game now, though I wasn't sure if Emma saw it that way. To her, I must have seemed like the perfect maid of honor, the one who showed up early, who coordinated everything, who smiled and took the credit for making everything run smoothly. But I wasn't just playing the role. I was setting her up for her biggest disappointment yet. It had been 2 weeks since the engagement party, and I had been careful, making sure Emma and Mark didn't feel like they were being attacked. They were blissfully unaware of the battle I was fighting behind the scenes. Emma was still in her perfect bubble, managing the wedding details with the kind of precision that only she could have, but I could feel the cracks in her confidence. She was starting to worry. She was starting to notice that her carefully constructed world was not as perfect as she thought. I had noticed it during our last lunch, a casual gathering at a restaurant I suggested. She'd arrived late, disheveled, distracted. When she sat down, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the fidgeting with her phone, her mind clearly elsewhere. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled. "Everything okay?" I asked, knowing the answer before she even spoke. Emma gave me a quick smile, but I could see it was forced. "Yeah, just wedding stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, pretending to care. "I get it. You're under a lot of stress." I leaned back in my chair, watching her squirm. I've been thinking, maybe we should have a bachelorette party soon. It could be a good way to relax a little before the big day." Her eyes lit up with something like relief, but only for a moment. She took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm herself. "That sounds great," she said, her voice quieter now. but I think Mark's sister already mentioned something about planning that. I pressed my lips together, hiding the smirk that wanted to surface. She was losing her grip. I could tell she was trying to push me out of the picture, trying to hold on to what little she had left. But she didn't realize it yet. The more she tried to push me away, the more I would push back. "I'm sure whatever you decide will be perfect," I said, my voice laced with sugar. "But I'm really excited for this whole experience. I know it'll be amazing. I'm so glad you asked me to be maid of honor." Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I couldn't imagine anyone else," she said, but the words felt empty. I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes, the doubt I had planted. We finished our meal in strained silence, the air between us thick with unspoken words. As I walked away, I realized something. I wasn't just trying to take the spotlight anymore. I was breaking her. Slowly, quietly. Emma thought she was still in control, but I was the one pulling the strings now. The wedding wasn't just about her anymore. It was about who would emerge victorious from this battle. And if she thought she could win, she was sorely mistaken. The final phase of my plan had started, and she had no idea what was coming next. It wasn't long before Emma's world started to feel more fragile. At first, I thought it might just be me reading into things, but it became too obvious to ignore. She had started to distance herself from the wedding planning. I could see her hiding behind her phone, not engaging in the decisions the way she used to. The once energetic, hands-on bride was now barely making it through meetings. And I was right there to pick up the pieces, taking on more of the responsibilities, offering suggestions, and taking the reins where she'd once led. I had managed to position myself as the perfect maid of honor, the supportive friend, the one who would always have her back. But with every task I took over, I saw her confidence crumbling piece by piece. It wasn't intentional at first. I hadn't meant for it to feel like an all-out assault. I was just trying to make sure everything went smoothly. But soon, I was the one organizing everything. The seating chart, the floral arrangements, the schedule for the big day. All of it fell on me, and Emma seemed more than happy to let me handle it. The wedding that had once been hers was starting to feel more and more like mine. But I didn't care. Because the more I did, the more I realized how much she had been relying on me all these years. She had built a life around being the center of attention, and I had always been her quiet shadow. Now, I was the one standing in the light, and she was the one fading into the background. One evening, we met to discuss the final details for the wedding, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I was ready to take the final step, to truly plant the seed of doubt in her mind about her place in her own celebration. As we sat in the coffee shop, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She was barely listening to my ideas. Her mind was somewhere else, lost in a fog of her own stress and insecurity. "I think we should change the color scheme," I said, deliberately placing the suggestion on the table. "The blush tones are beautiful, but I feel like the champagne would work better. It's elegant, timeless. It'll really pop with the flowers." I watched her closely as she processed the idea, looking for any sign of resistance. She sighed. "I don't know, Liv. I kind of liked the original plan. But if you think it's a good idea, we can go with it." I was winning, and she didn't even know it. "It'll look amazing. Trust me," I said with a smile, putting the finishing touches on the decision. It wasn't just the color scheme. It was everything I had been doing behind the scenes. It was about making her feel like she wasn't needed anymore, making her question if she had the strength to make decisions for herself. I was breaking her down so carefully, so subtly, that she didn't even know it was happening. After our meeting, I walked back to my car, the satisfaction of the evening settling into my bones. I had crossed a line I hadn't thought I would. I wasn't just taking the spotlight. I was becoming the star of her show. I knew she was starting to feel the pressure. And the best part? She had no idea how much control I had gained over her life. She didn't see it coming. And when the time was right, I would make my move, ensuring that she would never take me for granted again. In the end, I wasn't just taking back what she had stolen. I was making sure she would never forget who made her wedding the most talked about event of the year. By now, I could see the cracks in Emma's perfect world more clearly than ever. The wedding was a few weeks away, and with each passing day, her anxiety grew. She was still the bride, still the one who everyone thought was in control, but I could see her unraveling. Every time I offered a suggestion, every time I made another decision on her behalf, the facade chipped away just a little more. She didn't fight me. She didn't argue. Instead, she would nod, distracted, or make a half-hearted comment like, "That sounds good." She had become a shadow of the person I had once known. But the worst part? She was starting to doubt herself. I could see it in the way she carried herself. She was no longer walking around with the confident strut she'd once had. Instead, she walked like she was constantly searching for something. Approval, validation, control. She no longer had the willpower to fight for what she wanted. She was a puppet, and I was pulling the strings. And I loved it. The night before the bridal shower, Emma and I met at her apartment to go over the final details. I knew it would be another chance to slowly insert myself further into the narrative. She had been on edge all day, running around trying to finalize everything, and I could tell she was exhausted. "I just don't know what to do anymore," she said as she poured herself a glass of wine, her voice barely a whisper. "There's so much left to do, and I feel like I'm failing at it all." I studied her for a moment, feeling that familiar pang of sympathy. The old me would have comforted her, told her everything would be fine. But tonight was different. Tonight I had to push her further. "You're not failing," I said softly, but my words were laced with a quiet sense of control. "But maybe you need to let some things go, you know? Trust me, you don't have to do everything yourself. You've got people to help you. You've got me." She looked up at me, her tired eyes searching my face for reassurance. "I know. I don't want to disappoint anyone, Liv." "Don't worry about disappointing anyone," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "Focus on what makes you happy. You deserve to have a wedding you actually enjoy, not one you're constantly stressed about. Maybe it's time you let go of the reins a little. Let me take care of the details." I saw the hesitation in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by relief. She was tired, so tired of the responsibility. And all I had to do was offer her a way out. "Okay," she agreed, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "I'll let you take care of it. I trust you." And that was it. Just like that, I had taken another piece of her away. She had trusted me, and now she was giving me full control of the wedding. Every decision, every detail was mine to make. It wasn't just the maid of honor role anymore. I had become the one running the show. Emma no longer had the power to dictate her own celebration. She was relying on me, and she didn't even know how deeply I had already taken over. As she went to bed that night, I sat alone on her couch, letting the weight of what I had just done sink in. I wasn't just going to be the villain in her story. I was going to be the hero too. The one who saved her wedding. The one who made it everything she'd ever dreamed of. Only it wouldn't be her dream, would it? It would be mine. I wasn't just orchestrating a wedding. I was orchestrating her downfall, and I was relishing every second of it. The day of the bridal shower arrived, and I could feel the tension building. Emma had relinquished control to me, and with every decision I made, I could see her anxiety continue to mount. The shower was supposed to be her moment of joy, a time to bask in the celebration of her upcoming wedding, but I wasn't sure she was capable of enjoying it anymore. She was too wrapped up in the whirlwind of everything else. The guest lists, the wedding details, her insecurities. And I was right there, taking care of every little thing. I had spent weeks organizing the shower, selecting the venue, the catering, the games, and the theme. I had made sure everything would look perfect, ensuring the decorations matched the color scheme I had suggested for the wedding. I even personally handpicked the perfect set of gifts for her, gifts that had been tailored to her personality, gifts that I knew she would be too overwhelmed to appreciate fully. When we arrived at the venue, Emma seemed more detached than ever. She was preoccupied, distracted by the endless checklist running through her mind. I greeted the guests, took charge of the drinks, made sure everything was set up as planned. I kept Emma close, but she wasn't truly present. She was lost in her own thoughts, probably wondering where she went wrong. "Everything looks perfect," she mumbled, her voice barely audible over the music. I smiled inwardly, knowing she believed that. She didn't realize it was perfect because of me. It was all my doing, my vision, and she was just along for the ride. The shower went off without a hitch. I made sure to keep the spotlight on Emma, of course, but I subtly made my presence known at every moment. When the gifts were opened, I made sure my carefully selected presents for her were the ones that garnered the most attention. I watched as the other guests cooed over the extravagant items I'd chosen, and Emma, though appreciative, looked worn out. She couldn't even enjoy the moment. She barely smiled, her eyes flickering from one person to the next, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. I could see the others starting to notice the change in her. Her friends, her family, they all kept trying to engage her, but Emma seemed detached, her mind running at 1,000,000 miles per hour. They asked her questions about the wedding, but her answers were short, distracted. It was as if the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders, and no one but me seemed to understand what was really happening. As the shower came to an end and the guests began to trickle out, Emma took a moment to thank everyone, her voice strained. I stood by her, offering support where I could, knowing she was on the brink of a breakdown. But she didn't know it yet. She didn't realize that she was losing control of everything. When everyone had finally left, Emma turned to me, her face drawn, her eyes tired. She gave me a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for helping me with everything today, Liv," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I'm just really overwhelmed." I smiled back, a little too sweetly. "You deserve to relax," I told her, placing a hand on her arm. "You've been doing so much already. You don't need to carry the weight of it all on your own. You can leave the hard stuff to me. I'm here for you." Her relief was palpable, and in that moment, I knew I had her. She needed me now more than ever. She had let me in, let me take over, and she had no idea how much control I had gained. The maid of honor role was just the beginning. Now I was the one who would shape the narrative, the one who would make sure the wedding went exactly how I wanted it. As Emma retreated to her room to decompress, I stood in the empty hall, the silence settling around me. For the first time, I allowed myself to savor the feeling. I had won. The real wedding had already begun, and soon everyone would know that it was my name, not Emma's, that everyone would remember. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur, but I never lost sight of my goal. I could feel the tension in the air, the palpable sense of Emma's unease, and I reveled in it. Each day, I watched her become more exhausted, more distant from the people around her. The bride-to-be was no longer the center of attention. I had taken that from her, and now she was nothing more than a bystander in her own life. The day before the wedding, Emma called me late in the evening, her voice shaking as she asked if I could come over to help her with the final details. Of course, I agreed. After all, it was the least I could do after all I'd done for her. But when I arrived at her apartment, I could see the cracks in her composure. She looked like a ghost of herself, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, her shoulders hunched under the weight of her own stress. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's all so much." I stood there, silently observing her, my hands folded in front of me. I could feel the power surge through me as I realized just how far gone she was. She needed me. She was falling apart, and I was the only one who could keep everything from collapsing. "You don't have to do this alone," I said, walking over to her. My voice was calm, steady, the perfect balm to her anxiety. "You have me, Emma. You've always had me." She looked up at me, the relief flooding her features. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. I feel like everything's slipping through my fingers. You're not slipping, Emma, I reassured her. You're just letting go. And that's okay. You've been carrying this all on your own for so long, you deserve to let someone else take the weight. You deserve to enjoy this day. The words felt so true, so sincere, and I knew she believed them. But the truth was, I wasn't here to help her. I was here to finish what I had started. The wedding wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about finally having control over something I had always been denied. I sat with her for hours that night, going through last-minute details, offering suggestions, taking over more of the decisions. I could see her slipping further, her exhaustion more apparent with each passing minute. By the time we called it a night, she was barely coherent, her body sinking into the couch as she let out a final, exhausted sigh. You're going to be amazing tomorrow, I told her as I stood to leave, my voice a soothing promise. Everything's going to go perfectly. You just need to rest. She nodded weakly, a small, grateful smile crossing her lips. I'm so lucky to have you, she murmured. I left her apartment with a sense of triumph, knowing that I had pushed her to the brink without her even realizing it. She had no idea how completely she had ceded control to me. Tomorrow, on the wedding day, everything would fall into place, and I would be the one everyone remembered. I wasn't just the maid of honor anymore. I was the orchestrator of it all. And when the day was over, I would have everything I had ever wanted. The power, the control, the recognition. Tomorrow, Emma's wedding wouldn't be hers anymore. It would be mine. And no one would ever know the truth. The wedding day arrived like a storm, full of energy and anticipation, but I was calm. Too calm. I had anticipated every moment, every twist and turn. Emma was a bundle of nerves, barely holding herself together as she put on the dress that was meant to symbolize her new life. The veil, the gown, the shoes, all of it, designed to make her feel like the most beautiful woman in the room. But the truth was, none of it mattered anymore. I had already stolen the spotlight. I spent the morning with her, helping her into the dress, fixing her makeup, offering words of encouragement, all the while quietly watching her crumble beneath the pressure. Every time I made a suggestion, every time I handled a detail, I could see the relief in her eyes. She wanted to hand over the reins. She wanted to surrender to the chaos because it was easier than fighting for control. The wedding venue was stunning, exactly what I had imagined when I first took over the planning. I had made sure it was perfect, a flawless vision of elegance. The guests began to filter in, some of Emma's friends, some of Mark's family, but none of them knew the truth. They didn't know how carefully I had constructed this day for myself. They didn't know that everything they saw, the flowers, the music, the food, had been orchestrated by me. When it came time to walk down the aisle, I could see the nerves in Emma's face. She was stiff, not the radiant bride I had imagined her to be. She looked lost, alone even, despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. I stood beside her, the maid of honor, my role more important than it had ever been. My dress, carefully chosen to complement hers, felt like armor. I stood taller than I ever had. And when the music began, it wasn't Emma who commanded attention. It was me. As we made our way to the altar, I saw how Mark's eyes drifted to me more than to her, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that I relished in. The ceremony began, and I stood there, watching the couple exchange vows. Mark's voice was shaky, unsure. Emma's was too controlled, forced. I knew this moment wasn't what either of them had envisioned. I could feel the discomfort in the air. The vows, the promises, everything felt hollow, scripted. As if neither of them were fully there, as if this was all a performance to make it look like everything was perfect. When the time came for the exchange of rings, Emma was trembling and her hand shook as she held the ring out to Mark. I could see her struggle to hold it together, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything. The years I spent in her shadow. The years I spent watching her take everything I wanted. The years I spent silently taking the back seat in our friendship, always putting her needs above my own. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. As the vows ended and the officiant declared them husband and wife, the applause echoed through the room. Everyone stood, clapping and cheering. But as they kissed, my eyes didn't leave Emma's face. She looked like a stranger to me now, someone I no longer recognized. After the ceremony, the reception kicked off. Emma was still the bride, but I could see it in her face. She wasn't in control anymore. She had become a figurehead in her own wedding, and I was the one running the show. I danced, I mingled, I made the toasts. I was the one people noticed, the one who commanded the room. When I spoke, everyone listened. When I laughed, others laughed with me. Emma? She was fading into the background just as I had planned. As the evening drew to a close, I stood beside her once again, watching the guests filter out. She was exhausted, her makeup smudged, her smile strained. But I was calm. I was satisfied. I had won. Emma's wedding day was perfect, yes. But it was perfect because I had made it that way. The only difference was that it wasn't her victory to claim. It was mine. And I knew that when the day was over, when the wedding was nothing but a memory, it wouldn't be Emma's name people remembered. It would be mine. The aftermath of the wedding was exactly what I had expected. Quiet, but full of tension. Everyone was still talking about how beautiful the day had been, how everything had gone off without a hitch. But what they didn't know, what none of them could ever know, was how much of it had been my doing, and how much Emma had lost in the process. She had tried so hard to hold on to her picture-perfect vision of the day, but it was never hers to begin with. I couldn't shake the feeling of satisfaction that lingered in the air, even as I stood beside her the morning after the wedding. Emma was barely holding it together, her exhaustion evident in the way her eyes drooped, the dullness in her voice as she greeted family members, thanking them for attending. She smiled through the motions, but I could see the cracks. She wasn't truly happy. Not like she should have been. I had made sure of that. As I stood there, listening to her try to keep up appearances, I realized something. I had taken everything from her. The wedding, the attention, the spotlight. But it was never enough. I hadn't just wanted her place at the altar or at the center of the reception. I wanted her entire life. And in a way, I had it. I was the one people remembered. I was the one people praised. I had created the perfect wedding, the perfect day, and Emma had nothing left to hold on to. "Thank you for everything, Liv," Emma said softly, breaking me from my thoughts. I glanced at her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes. She was grateful, but there was something else there too. Something deeper. A flicker of realization, maybe. "Of course," I said, my voice smooth, controlled. I was happy to help. After all, I wanted this to be perfect for you. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than I expected. "It really was," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, though inside I was savoring the moment. She had no idea what I had truly taken from her. She still thought I had helped her. She still thought this was her victory. And that, I realized, was the true beauty of it all. She was so close to understanding, but not quite there. She hadn't realized how much of her world I had shifted, how much of it was now mine. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I received a call that evening. It was Mark. He sounded strangely distant, as if something was bothering him. But I wasn't concerned. I was used to dealing with people's discomfort, with pushing them just enough to get the reaction I wanted. "Hey, Liv," he said, his voice hesitant. "Listen, I wanted to thank you again for everything you did for Emma and me. You really stepped up." I smiled, the warmth in my voice betraying none of the satisfaction I was feeling. "Of course, Mark. It was my pleasure. I'm just glad everything turned out so perfectly." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, about that," he said, his voice shifting. I think Emma's been a little overwhelmed. She's been acting differently since the wedding. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think it's all catching up with her. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't surprised. The cracks in Emma's facade were growing wider. I had pushed her, and now she was starting to break down. But I wasn't worried. This was exactly what I wanted. She had to feel the weight of it. The guilt, the exhaustion, the realization that she wasn't as perfect as she thought. I'll talk to her, I said calmly. She's been through a lot. Weddings are stressful for everyone. She just needs time to adjust. We'll work through it. Mark sighed, the relief in his voice palpable. Thanks, Liv. I knew you'd understand. Of course, I said again, this time with a faint smile. Anything for family. As I hung up the phone, I felt an eerie calm wash over me. I had done it. Emma had lost everything, and I had gained everything in return. The wedding, the attention, the admiration, the control, all of it was mine. And Emma? She would never be the same. She would never regain what I had taken from her. The best part? She didn't even know the full extent of what had happened. The victory wasn't just in the wedding, or in the control I had gained over her life. The victory was in her silence, her uncertainty, the quiet realization that she was no longer the star of her own story. I was. And I always would be. The weeks after the wedding were both a relief and a burden. I had gotten what I wanted, but it wasn't the satisfying victory I had imagined. As the dust settled and the honeymoon phase of Emma and Mark's marriage kicked in, the fallout from the wedding began to seep in. I could feel it in the air every time Emma called or texted me. The gratitude, the thanks, the forced smiles, they were all starting to feel like chains. She was still the same Emma, but she wasn't the same. She had become more fragile, more distant, and it was becoming harder to be around her without the weight of what I had done hanging over me. I could feel her pulling away, trying to rebuild what little was left of her life, but she couldn't escape the damage. She had tried to remain the center of her own world, but I had made sure that world no longer revolved around her. Every phone call she made to me, every text she sent was full of forced politeness. She was polite, of course, always thanking me for helping her and Mark, but there was something different about her tone. The desperation was gone, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. She was no longer looking for guidance from me. She was trying to find her way back to herself, but the road was already too far gone. One afternoon, I ran into her at the grocery store. It was unexpected. I hadn't seen her in a couple of weeks, and though she was still wearing that tight smile, her eyes were different. She wasn't the happy bride anymore, but someone who had lost herself in the whirlwind of it all. "Hey," she said, her voice strained but trying to be cheerful. "How are you?" I tilted my head, studying her for a moment. "I'm good," I replied, keeping my voice light. "How about you? How's married life treating you?" Her smile faltered for a second before she quickly regained her composure. It's good. Really good. Just, trying to adjust to everything." I could feel her avoiding my gaze, a subtle shift in the way she stood. She was on the defensive, trying to convince me, and herself, that everything was fine. But I saw through it. The cracks were visible now, more than ever. "I'm sure it's a lot to handle," I said, giving her the space to let her walls down. I wanted to see how far she'd go with this. "I mean, you had so much going on leading up to the wedding. It must feel like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders now." She nodded, but it was a hollow gesture. "Yeah, but it's different now. You know? Things feel, I don't know, quiet. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing." I didn't say anything for a moment. I could feel her looking at me, searching for some sort of reassurance. She wanted me to say something that would make everything feel okay, something that would fix her fractured world. But I didn't offer that. I wanted her to feel this, to experience the void I had created. "Sometimes quiet can be good," I said, my voice colder than I had intended. It's a chance to breathe, to find yourself again. Emma's face fell for just a second before she forced a smile back into place. Yeah, maybe. Thanks, Liv. I watched her walk away, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of guilt. But it passed quickly. She had played her part in all of this. She had let me fade into the background for years, let me take a back seat while she lived her perfect life. And now, she was paying the price. Her marriage, the wedding, the life she had once carefully constructed. It was all slipping through her fingers, and I was the one holding the pieces. The truth was, I had never been satisfied with just the wedding. I had never wanted to be just the maid of honor. I wanted to be the one who people talked about. I wanted to be the one who people remembered, and I had done everything to make sure that was the case. I had already won. And Emma? She would never be the same. Her world would never be hers again, and I would always be the reason why. As I walked out of the store, I let the reality of that settle in. I had no need to feel guilt anymore. There was nothing left for me to take from her. Everything had already been claimed. The control, the spotlight, the validation, it was all mine. And Emma? She was left with nothing but the hollow echoes of a life she had lost, a life that could never be restored. And that was all I had ever wanted. Time passed, but the power I held over Emma never truly faded. It wasn't the kind of victory that faded with time, like a fleeting moment of revenge. No, this was something deeper, something that rooted itself in the lives of everyone involved. Emma's friends, her family, even Mark. They all began to see the subtle shifts in her behavior, the way she was no longer the bright, confident woman she used to be. She was withdrawing, quietly breaking down, and while no one said it out loud, everyone could feel it. But the beauty of it all? I was untouchable. I had orchestrated everything so meticulously that no one could pinpoint the exact moment Emma's world began to crack. It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small moments. The late-night texts, the subtle shifts in our friendship, the moments when I had taken just a little more control until there was nothing left for her to cling to. I heard the whispers, of course. I overheard conversations at work, at social gatherings, people wondering what had happened to Emma. She's just not the same, they would say. Something's off. They weren't wrong, of course, but they would never understand what had truly changed. One evening, I got a message from Emma. It had been a few weeks since we had spoken much, but this message felt different. It was short, polite, but there was an underlying desperation in her words. I think we need to talk, she had written. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see her. Not yet. But curiosity got the better of me. So I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place we used to frequent together when things were simple. As I walked in, I saw her sitting by the window, staring out into the rain, her hands folded in front of her as if she had been waiting for hours. When she saw me, she forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a shadow of the person she used to be, someone who had once been full of energy and excitement. Now, she was a ghost of her former self. Liv, she said quietly, her voice shaking. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us, about the wedding, and everything that happened after. I don't know how to fix this. I sat down across from her, studying her closely. She looked worn out, defeated. I could see the weight of the last few months pressing down on her. She had no idea what I had done, not really. She thought it was just a series of coincidences, a natural shift. But the truth was far darker. You don't have to fix anything, I said softly, my voice calm, even comforting. You've been through a lot, and sometimes things just don't work out the way we expect them to. You did your best, Emma. You really did. She looked at me, her eyes wide, almost pleading. I feel like I'm losing everything, she whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to fix it. And that was the moment when everything I had done, the manipulation, the control, the slow stripping away of her confidence came to fruition. I could see it in her face. She was lost. She was broken. And it was all because of me. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. You don't have to fix anything, Emma. Sometimes we just have to let go and let things fall into place. Maybe it's time to let go of the things that have been holding you back. She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. I feel like I've failed, she said softly. You haven't failed, I reassured her, reaching across the table and placing my hand gently on hers. You just need to focus on yourself now. Let go of the things that aren't serving you. It's time to start over. And that's okay. Emma wiped her eyes, a small sob escaping her lips. I don't know if I can. I don't know how. I squeezed her hand, offering her the last bit of solace I would ever give her. You'll figure it out. I know you will. And you have me. I'll always be here. It was the final line in a story she would never understand. The damage had already been done, and there was no going back. The person she had been, the one who was confident and driven and full of life. That woman was gone. And I was the one who had taken her place. When I left the cafe, I knew that I had won. Emma would never be the same again. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. I had controlled the narrative. I had taken everything, and now I was free. The game was over, and I had come out on top. As time went on, Emma's life continued its slow unraveling, but my own life, well, it felt like I had finally claimed everything I had ever wanted. The satisfaction that came with knowing I had pushed Emma out of her own narrative was a strange, bittersweet feeling. It wasn't just about the wedding or the power I had seized. No, it was more than that. It was about the quiet acknowledgement that I had, in my own way, earned my place in the world. I had always been in her shadow. As her best friend, I had always played the role of the loyal sidekick, supporting her every dream, every choice, even when they meant sacrificing my own desires. I had let her live in the spotlight, never questioning her hold over me. But now, I was finally standing in the light. I was the one people remembered. I was the one everyone spoke of when they talked about the wedding. It was my name on their lips, my efforts that they admired. I kept up the facade of being the perfect friend. I checked in on Emma, always polite, always concerned. I was the one who reassured her that everything would be okay, that she just needed time. I was the one who played the role of the helpful, understanding confidant, while, deep down, I knew I had broken her. I had made her doubt herself so thoroughly that she would never be the same. Mark, too, was slipping away from her. The cracks in their relationship were more obvious now, and I could see how their once solid connection was being worn down by Emma's insecurities and my subtle interventions. He still called me from time to time, thanking me for helping Emma adjust after the wedding. But each conversation left me feeling like I had complete control over the situation. He was more distant with her, more distant with me as well. But that was part of the game, wasn't it? One evening, I was at a work event when I noticed Mark standing by the bar, his usual easygoing smile replaced by a pained look. I wandered over to him, pretending to be unaware of his discomfort. Mark? I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, as if nothing had changed. You doing okay? He glanced at me, caught off guard by the question, but then he smiled a little too quickly, trying to mask the tension in his face. Yeah, just wedding stuff, you know. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the strain. It wasn't the first time I'd heard him sound like this, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. But the truth was, I wasn't worried. I had already set the pieces in motion. Emma wasn't going to hold on to him forever. And even if she did, it wouldn't matter. You know, I continued, keeping my tone light, it's completely normal for things to feel off after the wedding. Sometimes people forget that it's not all sunshine and roses afterward. It's okay to feel lost for a while. I smiled softly, letting my words sink in. You should take some time for yourself. Don't let the chaos take over everything. Mark looked at me for a long moment as if weighing my words. Yeah, he finally said, his voice heavy with unspoken truths. Maybe you're right. I know, I replied. You deserve that. Just remember, you don't have to carry it all by yourself. It was all so easy now. The power, the control. It was all mine for the taking. I had become the master of this game, and Emma? She had become nothing more than a player in my story. When I left the event that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. Everything was falling into place. The world was mine to shape, and I had carefully constructed a narrative that would last. Emma would continue to fade into the background, and I would be the one remembered. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt like I was finally the person I had always deserved to be, and I would never let that go. The final pieces were in place. Emma's life, her love, her happiness. They were mine to control, to ruin, to rebuild. And I knew deep down that no matter what happened next, I would always hold the reins. This was my victory, and no one could ever take it from me. Months passed, and Emma's world continued to fall apart. The life she had once carefully constructed was now just a shadow of what it used to be. I watched from the sidelines, my own life on an upward trajectory, the glow of my successes reflecting in every decision I made. I had taken control of the wedding, of the narrative, of her, without her even realizing it. She would never truly understand what had happened, and that, in itself, was a kind of victory. But there was something nagging at me, something I couldn't shake. Despite the satisfaction of my actions, despite the power I held over her, I couldn't deny that a part of me still wondered if I had gone too far. Did I enjoy this too much? Was there any part of me left that cared for her, for the person she used to be? I had spent so long suppressing my feelings for her, pretending they didn't exist, that I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. After our last meeting at the cafe, she had pulled away, perhaps realizing that whatever we had left of our friendship was nothing more than a thin veil. She didn't call, didn't text. It was as if I had become a ghost in her life, and I had to admit, part of me relished it. After all, I had always been the one to fade into the background. This time, she was the one who was invisible. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but I recognized the area code. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Olivia? The voice was shaky, hesitant, but I knew who it was before she even finished speaking. It's Emma. For a moment, I said nothing. I had no words, no response. The past few months had felt like a dream, a carefully constructed reality I had created. And now here she was calling me, breaking the silence. How have you been? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I know I should have reached out sooner, but I just didn't know what to say. I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. She didn't know what to say? Of course she didn't. She couldn't even understand what had happened to her. And I, of course, hadn't made it any easier. I've been fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. How about you? She sighed. I don't know. I feel like I've lost everything. I don't know how to move on from this. I don't even know who I am anymore. It was hard to listen to her like this, to hear her so broken, so lost. Part of me wanted to say something comforting, to reassure her that everything would be okay. But another part of me, the part I had built over the past few months, wanted to savor her pain, to know that she was finally feeling the weight of the choices I had made. You'll figure it out, I said softly, my voice betraying nothing. We all have to find our way eventually. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, trying to steady herself. I don't think I can do this without you, she said, her voice cracking. I've been so lost without you. You were always there for me, and I don't know how to fix this. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the one I had been waiting for. I had broken her down so completely that now, She was looking to me for redemption. She had no idea how much control I had over her, how far I had pushed her to this point. But I didn't want to play the savior. Not anymore. "You'll be fine, Emma," I said, my voice firm. "You just have to let go of what you think you've lost. Life has a way of working itself out, even when we don't understand it." There was silence again. I could feel the weight of the words between us, but I couldn't bring myself to say more. I had taken everything I needed. Emma had nothing left to give me, and in a strange way, I felt empty. "I think I need some time," she said quietly, her voice filled with resignation. "I'm sorry, Liv, for everything." The words stung, but not in the way I expected. I had wanted her to feel regret, to understand the consequences of her actions, but this apology felt like nothing more than a hollow gesture. She would never truly understand what I had done, and that was fine. She didn't need to. "I understand," I said, my voice cool. "Take care of yourself, Emma." And with that, the call ended. As I sat there, phone still in my hand, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of it? Had I finally won? Or was there more to this story than I had yet to see? But then I realized it didn't matter. I had everything. The power, the control, the narrative, it was all mine. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. For the first time, I was free.